Hey YouTube, I hope you all are doing well. Been a little bit since we've been on, so a few updates to share. I am not on version 13, obviously. I don't think anything other than a few anybody other than a few employees and social media influencers have had the opportunity to see it. But what you may notice is new, if you're astute and pick up on it, even though the interior of this car probably looks a lot different, is that I did take advantage of the year-end offers, and we picked up this car on Saturday. We did the FSD transfer. I moved from a 2020 Model 3 standard range with full self-driving to this is a Model Y long-range all-wheel drive, and FSD was transferred within 24 hours. However, I was rolled back to 12.3.6, which was actually kind of nice because I was given the opportunity to kind of revisit 12.3.6. I think I preferred that over 12.5.4. So it gave me the opportunity to really look at it and say, okay, which one was better, right? There's improvements that happen that were nice, right? Like when you get to 12.5, you're hands-free entirely, right? I don't need to touch the wheel. You get rid of that nag, versus on 12.3.6 the nag was back. That was kind of frustrating in some ways, but it actually wasn't too horrible, considering that I think 12.3.6 did certain things a little bit better overall. I will say that phantom braking was not an issue on 12.3.6 for me, and didn't seem to be for the few days that I had it on this car. But as of this afternoon, I was pushed an update to 12.5.4.2, so I'm back to where I was, and phantom braking was apparent within the first 5 minutes of my attempted drive not too long ago. So this video, I'm trying out a couple of different things, right? You know, phone mount, microphone options for being able to pick me up as I'm talking, and without a bunch of either background noise or other issues that could kind of creep in from just using the iPhone. I'm also, I have a little bit more flexibility with the camera placement, because your entire roof line in the Y is glass, versus with the Model 3 that wasn't necessarily the case. There's a cross member that you have to contend with, and so I either would have had to have mounted my camera on the Model 3 back in the rear seat, or I had to have it where it was for the prior videos. This one I can give a little bit more room, so I could actually have just a touch more flexibility. So I tried to set it up in a place where you have visibility of the screen. Technically you can kind of see me potentially in the rear view mirror touch. I'm trying to keep the camera from showing up in the rear view mirror, and then you know, a good view of the road. So that's kind of knock out the first things. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, and main reason for this video, is hardware 3 versus hardware 4. What have I noticed, right? As you make that transition for anybody else who's making the decision right now as to, do I want hardware 3 or hardware 4? Let's start with the GPU. So Intel Atom versus AMD Ryzen. I think that's kind of a no-brainer. I think everybody's going to say AMD Ryzen is much better, clearly. It's more responsive, etc. If somebody told me that in their budget they could only afford a vehicle that was an Intel Atom chip, that's what I had before, in a used car, etc., I wouldn't knock it at all. I wouldn't be like, oh, find the extra money, go buy an AMD Ryzen. It just, you know, you get what you get. They all work just fine. The experience is going to be the same. It's just going to be a little bit slower, and you do have I want to say, a slightly sharper, crisper image on screen. Definitely more responsive in the sense of, like, if you're loading up a YouTube video or Netflix or something, it happens a little bit quicker. It's not so insanely fast that like I wouldn't put it in the category for anybody who's old like me that remembers like dial-up versus high-speed internet. Like it's not like going from dial-up to high-speed internet, but it is different, and it is several seconds, and over, I don't know, a lot of different interactions. Maybe it's several minutes, but for most of the people, most of the time, if you're sitting at a charger and you just go bring up YouTube and load a video, and the video loads and starts playing, like that's it, you're fine. It's really not that big of a deal. So that knocks out just the graphics. So that gets us into, what about full self-driving experience? How is that different on hardware 3 versus hardware 4? One of the things that I'm not 100% on and thinking through a bit is what's happening with, like, if I make a turn. I do feel like, now again, this is a Model Y versus a Model 3, so body style's a little bit different, etc. So it may just be me perception-wise getting used to the new vehicle, the shape of the new vehicle, etc. But I do feel like it cuts the corners a lot tighter when making a right-hand turn. And I feel like with the 3 it didn't. I don't know if that's because of the sensors. You know, the sensors were really, really accurate at gauging like where a curb was, or anything for that matter that might be an obstruction, versus like the vision only I have found is not as reliable for judging distance. It's not bad, but it's also not as precise. So that is one thing you give up when you go from hardware 3 to hardware 4. Anybody that had the sensors or a vehicle with those sensors, if you're somebody who has to park in tight spaces, or you know, where that kind of precision is going to be important to you, hands down hardware 3 was better in that regard. But as far as, you know, taking the curb is really the only area where I've noticed a difference, is that it just feels like it's tighter. I worry a little bit more that I might end up having FSD like give me some curb rash on my tires, because in the past I really didn't have to worry about that too much, and now I'm like, oh, that feels close. So there is that experience. Hardware 4, I'm not sure if it's hardware 4 in terms of the cameras or hardware 4 in terms of the compute power, but it does feel more decisive. Like if I come to a stop and then I pick up and move forward, it does seem like it decides it's going to go. This is going to be interesting, by the way, because most people would have gotten over a long time ago to get over. We're going to make a right-hand turn here in a second, and so I'm just wondering if we're cutting people off. Nope. Found the gap pretty easily and moved over. So we got a little lucky. We had a nice little gap we can get into. Now it needs to get over here, and it's kind of not. Yeah, that was a little bit of a get into your lane type of scenario. So we are good to go. I always double check, as you saw, like that car pulled out, because this is this particular road is a I'm forgetting the term for it, but it runs parallel to the highway, and so there are people who will drive straight across that intersection, so it's not like they're an on or off ramp where they're trying to get you know, onto that particular street. Sometimes they're actually trying to still get down the road a little bit. People forget that, and they'll pull out a little prematurely, assuming that everybody who's coming off of the interstate is see, we're just kind of trying to pay attention to something with traffic. Anyway, so back to the story with hardware 3, hardware 4. Overall, I feel like it's generally more decisive. I think the flip side of that is, when I'm talking about the phantom braking that I've seen on hardware 3, like I'd have phantom braking and it would kind of slow down or come to a stop, but it was never like super abrupt, right? And most of the time it was just like, why are we slowing down, or why is it braking? Versus with hardware 4, I've already had 2 experiences where it was almost like an emergency stop, like it was braking hard, and I'm like, oof, that is not enjoyable. So looking forward to version 13 when it comes out. The nice thing about being on hardware 4 is I feel like I'll be on the front end, or closer to the front end, when version 13 runs out, to be able to test it, give you guys feedback. So speaking of which, version 13, thoughts on technologically what's going to happen there for anybody who's on hardware 3. I think hardware 3 will still get it. I just think it's going to take a while for file compression. And I also, after having the experience between hardware 3 and hardware 4, and like I said, the onboard compute power, my guess is that it'll just run smoother on hardware 4. So even though you'll be able to get 13 on hardware 3 at some point, it's not going to be as clean, it's not going to be as smooth of an experience. I'm curious personally to see, because I almost didn't sell my hardware 3 car. I almost wanted to keep it in the family and find another use for it, but truthfully, it just didn't make sense to hold on to it. There's enough value in the car that I could honestly sell it and use it towards a down payment on this car, and reduce my monthly payment, etc. So the deal itself, here's where we're not getting a very good job of moving over. So what happens, and I don't know if it shows up very well in the screen here, we'd have to go back and look at the video and see how well you can see it, but when you come off of that turn or transition where you're merging into this road, the typical human driver is just very assertive, and if there's a gap, they'll fill that gap and immediately cut over to the left-hand side, or excuse me, to the right lane or to the redder lane. So this is, I'm accelerating here because the car was trying to brake to get over, and have cars behind us, etc. Anyway, so version 12 stuff that I'm not a huge fan of. We've had this issue before, but it's just not as assertive at getting over as it needs to be, and then all the other traffic around you starts taking your spot, and then the car starts doing this weird, I don't know how you describe it, it's just a very weird hesitation to do what it needs to do to get over. We had the opportunity to get over a lot sooner than we did, but it basically gave up that lane. Now, the car, when it was moving over to the right and being assertive, it was going all the way over to the right lane, so technically the car was able to get to the middle lane, but it really needed to do the same thing, which was get all the way over to the right side, and didn't have to do it right away, but certainly an example of how the software takes its time getting over. Humans will fill the gap a lot faster, and therefore it makes version 12 seem like it's very hesitant and not driving as assertively as it should, because those cars would have completely yielded to us if we were the ones that were making it over to the full right hand side. So back to hardware 3, hardware 4, that's just a software thing that I think everybody's already seen in a gazillion videos. Generally speaking, when I say it's more assertive, that was completely a weird, like it just decided to cut left real quick instead of, and I actually, believe it or not, didn't disengage that. I think what happened, something's going on, because it gave me the notice that I like to keep my hands on the wheel, which I'm supposed to be pure eyesight right now, so I'm not sure why I gave that message. But anyway, it disengaged itself, but I had my hands there to kind of take over and drive. So anyway, I'm very much looking forward to getting off of 12.5.4. To be truthful, on the Model 3, I had enough of those types of weird disengagements on 12.5.4.1 and 2 and the phantom braking issues that for driving during any kind of rush hour where it was busy, like right now, this is when everybody's kind of going home, etc. It felt a little too unsafe to demo it at that time, right? Like people are not going to know how to react to a car just randomly slamming on its brakes. Things of that nature. So I'm using it right now, but but yeah, it's something that I would preserve more for testing or driving. And the highways wasn't really a big deal, but for the city streets, it almost became, at least for me, a little unusable, because I would have these phantom braking issues around here, local to my neighborhood, on a pretty consistent basis. And just one of those things where it was like, okay, I'm not dealing with that. That's kind of a pain. So, but this is where I was talking about like more consistency in terms of anybody who has chatted with me before about this particular intersection as an example. On HW3, instead of like that was a very, very slow transition, and there was somebody standing there with their dog, but I would start and stop. Like it would literally go forward 3 inches, then slam on the brake, then go forward 3 inches and slam on the brake, and then do it again. Sometimes 3 or 4 times I would deal with that issue. Versus that, at least it just continued to move. So anyhow, hopefully I've at least shared some insights for you in terms of like HW3 versus HW4. Really looking to get out of 12.5 and into something that eliminates the phantom braking. I think with phantom braking gone, or at least let's just say from being as bad as it has been lately, once that's gone, I think I'll be more comfortable doing a lot more testing and a lot more driving at any given time and doing more recording there. But that remains to be seen. We'll see when it happens. So hopefully before year end.